Hello, my name is Zam, and welcome back to my channel. Alright, man, Shingeki Day. Coming off yet another incredible episode. Of course, the great Commander Smith was laid to rest, and Armin is now the Colossal Titan. His life is just absolutely changed. So yeah, man, let's see how it all plays out. Before I go any further, if you're interested in full length for this episode or even early access to the next episode right now, consider checking out the Patreon page. Consider checking out the listings there. Maybe something might catch your eye, and in doing so, you'll be supporting the channel. Consider checking out the pinned comment. It has links to my social media. It has links to the Patreon page, and it also has any updates if there are any updates that need to go up. And it's right at the top of the comment section, so check that out from time to time. So yeah, that's about it. Let's get right into the episode. Yeah, they showed that shot. Bertolt's. Oh, the tears. Wow.
エレン、ありのままを話せ。どうだ、分かったか、アルミ。
どうして僕なんですか。誰がどう考えたってエルヴィン団長を生き返らせるべきじゃないですか。兵長、どうして僕に撃ったんですか。
ありのまま話せと言ったろうが。少なくともお前の仲良し二人はそうは思わなかったようだぞ。
俺たちはどんな処分も受けます。
Okay.
当然兵器違反の罰は受けてもらうが、罰さえ受ければ何をしてもいいのかい？
いい。
Great point.
最終的にお前を選んだのは俺だ。いや、俺の市場でエルヴィンの死に場所を決めちまったんだ。
There it is.
エルヴィン団長が死んでいいわけがない。
It is. It was for Levi.
僕たちはこの先どうすれば。
私もエルヴィンに撃つべきだと思ったよ。正直に言えばね。いや、何よりそんな状況を防げない。
Exactly.
君にはエルヴィンの命と巨人の力が託された。
The burden.
誰に何と言われようと、君はもうそういう存在なんだ。
I like that she's not sugarcoating anything.
僕がエルヴィン団長。
No, no one can replace him.
そんな
They can't expect that of him.
お前じゃエルヴィンの代わりにはなれねえ。だが、お前はお前で人にはない力を持っていることも確かだ。俺は後悔するつもりはない。ただ、こいつらを後悔させるな。他の誰も、お前自身も後悔させるな。
No regrets.
それがお前の使命だ。
うるさい。
Gotta love Sasha.
サシャにはかなわないな。
はい。
Holy shit, this is actually gonna happen.
鍵はなくしてないかい？
はい。ここに。
エレン。
This music is from episode 2. It really reminds me of episode 2. Carla. Turning that corner.
この家かい？ の地下室見せてくれる？
さあ、お前が一番大事なものに気づいた時かな。
She told him he has to care for Mikasa up there.
よかった。水は溜まってないみたいだ。
This is monumental. Well, that's the shot from the intro, right? Right at the end. There it is. From the post-credit.
エレン、
はい。
Oh my god.
イエーガー先生が持ってたのはその鍵のはず。
It's a key to something else?
俺が開ける。
ちょっと
Jeez.
待ってよ。
ちょっと待ってよ。Seen a similar shot to that in episode 2.
何も怪しいものはありません。私にはそう主張しているようにね。
I suppose that's the point, right?
中央憲兵に見られて困るようなもんは一見しただけじゃわかんねえだろ。
So that key goes to some...
突っ立ってんじゃねえぞガキど。エルヴィンの勘はそう外れねえよ。
ありがとうミカサ。今夜は徹夜だ。
There it is, keyhole.
エレン、
二重底だ。
この匂いは発火油に木炭。防湿防虫剤用に加工されているのか。
俺たちの探し物はこれらしい。
親父は俺に何を見せたかったんでしょうか。
This is it. This is it.
その時エルヴィンはこう質問しました。壁の外に人類がいないってどうやって調べたんですかと。
それなのに歴史書は食い尽くされたと断言している。本来歴史書というのは客観的であるべきで、食い尽くされたと思われると表記するのが正しいはずだ。
そんなもの言葉の上げ足取りじゃないか。
違う、主観的な意図があるんだ。例えば壁外に人類は存在しないと思い込ませたいとか、それはつまり歴史書を発行する王政側の意図だ。
あの時茶化した自分が今となっては。
本人に直接詫びるほかあるまい。
ただいま調査兵団が帰還いたしました。
So it's a bit of a time
オ
skip?
ルマリア奪還成功です。
Friggle. That was a picture, or the photo. The family portrait.
ちょっと見せて。いや、人が描いたものとは思えないほどの精巧さだ。
それおじさんの字。
これは絵ではない。これは被写体の光の反射を特殊な紙に焼き付けたもの。写真という。
私は人類が優雅に暮らす壁の外から来た。人類は滅んでなどいない。この本を最初に手にする者が同胞であることを願う。
That's Grisha in the... But... So, from the sounds of it, it looks like he's detailing his past. But the lead... Okay, I'll save it for the discussion.
待ってお兄さん。待ちなさい、二人とも。外に出るときは腕章を忘れるなって言ってるだろう。グリシャ、壁の外には絶対に出るんじゃないよ。
おい待て分かってるよ母さん。
行ってきます。
Oh my god, this is their hometown.
私はまず何から語るべきか考え、あの日を思い浮かべた。
おい、
ごめんなさい。
無理した。危ないぞ。前見て歩け。
Armbands reminds me of one really specific thing in history.
いつか私もお金持ちになったらあの飛行船に乗れるかな。
何言ってんだよ。俺たちが金持ちになれるわけないだろ
うん。でもいいな。
Oh.
そこから何が見えるんだろう。言っちゃった。
行くぞフェイ。飛行船の発着場は近くにあるって先生が言ってたんだ。見に行こう。いいんだよ、少しだけなら。すぐに戻ります。
おい、待てよお前ら。
あの幼き日、私はこの世の真実と向かい合った。
Whoa, okay. That was just insane. I mean, that is just holy shit, right? You know, it's clear that there's 2 points of this story, you know, before the basement and after the basement. You know, I saw a snippet of it, right? Snippet of Grisha's backstory, him as a young child, or yeah, he was a child, right? Not a young adult at that point, but yeah, just a snippet of that, and the things they showcased in that little snippet, just that alone is more than enough to, you know, absolutely change the landscape of this story, right? Perhaps the biggest turning point in the entire story. It really is going to change everything, and it does. You know, it has changed a lot of things in my mind about this story, and it's certainly imploring me to look back at some of my theories, right, and kind of go through them again and apply this new knowledge to those theories. Some might have been debunked, some maybe not so much. Some might still be alive. And it really does feel like that I'm about to get the most significant backstory of all, right? And that's crazy to say, because there's so many amazing characters in the show, and you know, so many of these characters bring different things to the story. But I feel like this, you know, this backstory, it really is a definitive game changer, right? After this point, it's always going to be before the basement and after the basement. And you know, there's certainly going to be an inciting incident. You know, Grisha alluded to that much at the end there. And I'm sure it's going to have its own progressions and turning points. Essentially, a mini drama, right, within a backstory. At least that, you know, so far in this story, that's that's the structure Isayama has followed, right, and he's executed it to perfection. And once again, his timing is just incredible, right? I believe he said, "I was about to face the truth of this world in that naive day of my youth," right? It was eerily similar, or had an eerily similar feeling to Eren and Mikasa in the pilot or in the first episode of the series. You know, man, you know, you can see it was so hopeful, especially as that score kicks in. You know, him taking his sister, you know, for it just had a playful and hopeful tone, right? But as the show has established for some time now, and you know, it's been pointed out again recently as well, you know, the world is just that cruel. I cannot see this ending on on a happy note for Grisha and his sister. I mean, Grisha is still, or he was still around long after this incident. And, you know, that setup, that snippet they showed at the end of him and his sister, it's certainly important, right? Because Grisha is choosing this point to start off his story, right? So it's, like I said, it's been, the inciting incident is being set up at the end of this episode. So, yeah. So there's so many different directions to go into. Just, oh my God. But I think the only place to really start is something quite dark. You know, it's the living conditions. It's clearly a distinct parallel to a dark time in actual history, in our history, the human history, right? The parallels are just kind of unmissable. You know, the armbands, you know, the walls that have them kind of separated, and it's got a military check post, you know, checking IDs before they let you in. Yeah, it's a dark parallel. Like I said, things just got really intense and dark. And, you know, in that sense, now the whole concept of them being called, you know, an evil race, right? A filthy race, spawns of the devil. All of that is starting to make sense now, right? Essentially, it is propaganda. It is brainwashing, right? They brainwashed these child soldiers, you know, people like Reiner and Bertolt and Annie, and they sent them in to the walls, right? And I'm straight out just calling it propaganda and brainwashing, because there's no, you know, oh, let's look at both sides of the story in this case. There just isn't. You cannot, you know, this is a distinct parallel here. You know, the subjugation, the oppression, the perhaps the dehumanizing regulations that are being put on these people. There's no both sides of the story here, right? This is dark, man. This is inhumane. So no. There is no. Oh, let me see their side of the story. You know, regardless of how it got to this point, this is just, you know, this is dark and inhumane, of course. That being said, it isn't a full-blown death camp or anything, but it is, you know, there's a distinction, there's a separation, right? And like the, you know, the propaganda that's been spread is that they are filthy, that they're an evil race, right? The parallels here are just insane. This is not the direction I thought it was going to head into. Yet again, another wall that separates the people, right? That seems to be a bit of a theme of this anime, right? This story. But, you know, I mentioned a military outpost, and, you know, they had people lined up to get into that area. I suppose they do have jobs, or they are allowed, you know, if you're qualified, perhaps that you are allowed into that area. And maybe they do allow you to earn a living, you know, and I'm sure it's not even close to the same level that's afforded to the people in that area, right? The actual citizens, I suppose. But they are allowing people in there, and in that sense, you know, there is a case of or a potential of growth, right? Or there is some potential for that, because, you know, on one end, Grisha is saying, oh, you know, there's no chance any of us are going to be that rich, right? But then later in the story, you know, it's clear that Grisha became a doctor, and he became a doctor there, right? They made all this kind of clear in episode 11, Bystander. He was a doctor before he showed up outside Wall Maria. So he was able to prosper, if I can say that. He was able to become a doctor. Now, that doesn't mean he was able to accumulate wealth doing it, right? But he was able to, you know, take that prospect of becoming a doctor. He was allowed that possibility. So yeah, perhaps there it's like, oh, if you follow a certain set of rules and you know your place, they'll allow you to perhaps take up jobs that you are able to prosper in. And in this photo, the family portrait, they look like, if you see their outfits, he looked like he was doing all right for himself at that moment in time. And I'll get into that in a bit. That photo. Actually, let's just get into it, man. So that photo, I first saw it back in the post-credit scene in episode 12. Now, some insane things are just, in my mind right now because, did this kind of debunk some of my theories or did it make even more insane? Now, it's been confirmed that that was Grisha in that family portrait, right? So also seemingly confirming that he had a totally different family back in that place, back in this hometown. Well, at least a hometown for Reiner and the warrior crew. But if that is Grisha in the photo, and that is his wife sitting in that seat, now my big theory, one of my main theories, is that the smiling titan is the lady in that photo, right? That was my big theory coming out of the episode 12 post-credit scene, right? I was like quite confident about that theory, but now it appears that this is Grisha's former or ex-wife, right? And again, that's another intriguing prospect here. How come he showed up alone by himself at the outside the walls for Keith Shardis to locate? He was by himself, so that has to be noted as well. Now, let's move to the toddler, right? Now, in the last episode, I changed my theory of Zeke, or the the Titan Shifter and the Beast Titan as Grisha's brother, right? That was my long running theory. But then this past episode and mixed in with some of the information from the episode before that made me realize that this is probably his son, right? So if it is his son, and I'm quite confident about that based on the things he was saying, that's him in the photo, right? Young Zeke. So, but see, here's the thing though. Now, is this debunking my theory about that lady, his wife, I guess, being the Smiling Titan? But not only that, I also theorized that this lady might be a royal of race blood. And that was the reason Eren was able to unlock the Founding Titan, or the abilities of the Founding Titan, or the coordinate in that moment after they touched. Is that still a possibility now? Now let's look at it from both angles. Either I say it's not a possibility, right, anymore, or I stick on that theory and then let's get deeper into it. If that is, well, it is Grisha's wife, that much is for sure. They've established that here. This is his past family. And so, okay, say if she is a royal, right? If she is of race blood, Grisha was able to prosper to a level where he was able to marry someone of royal blood, someone that's from royalty, right? So, like, how high did Grisha really go in this community or this civilization of theirs? Again, in the photo, it seems like he's doing all right for himself, right? Shit, this is such a mindfuck, man. Because I stick to that. If that is someone of royal blood or from their race family, his wife, then doesn't that make Zeke royal? right? Or half royal, kind of like Historia, because Grisha's not a royal blood. That's for sure. That's a given. It's been established in the story. So if that is someone of royal blood, that makes Zeke of royal blood. Really similar to Historia in that sense, right? Now, can't this is starting to sound kind of crazy now, right? So I don't know if that theory kind of stands anymore of her being of royal blood, and that being the reason Eren was able to unlock the abilities of the founding titan, the coordinate background, episode 12. Crazy stuff. And I made that connection because I started looking at other incidents of him having memories unlocked, and there's only one really that happened. It was Rod Race and Historia touching him, right? And both of them are royal blood, and that unlocked something within him. So then I made the connection that, okay, so that's one of the only other times that happened. That could potentially mean that this Titan could have been someone from the Race family or the royal family. But then the catch or the distinction here is that she was from outside the walls, right? She's from this place they all come from. So is it possible that Grisha prospered enough to become this distinguished doctor, and then he met this lady from the royal family, and they got married, and then they had this son who I think might be Zeke, basing on the stuff I was talking about in the last episode. It's just insane, man. But the thing is, this story and the things that have been established, there's some crazy things in here, so it's not out of the realm of possibility that all of that could be possible. Now again, the question becomes, did Grisha have to escape that place? Did he have to leave that place? That possibility is even stronger at this point, given this inhumane treatment of these people, this set of people, right? So that's certainly a possibility. Was he banished, right? That's a possibility as well. The one possibility I kind of didn't really think is a strong one is the one of him being the first of the warrior crew to show up. I mean, it was certainly a possibility, but it's not. It's just, given his actions after entering the walls, it kind of debunked it almost instantly, right? His actions are not that similar, or not similar at all, to those of the warrior crew that came later, right? Annie, Bertolt, Reiner, and Zeke, the war chief. And speaking of Zeke, if that is him in that photo, the family portrait, and if that is Grisha's son, and I do strongly feel about that at this point. I always felt that they're definitely related, and up until recently I thought that's certainly his brother. But then last episode really solidified him as my pick, or my new pick, as Grisha's son from a different marriage. And this episode almost seemingly confirms that as well, right? Showing us this family portrait of Grisha and this former wife, who I think ended up being the Smiling Titan, and clearly isn't around anymore, clearly, right? Because she was kind of picked apart in episode 12, season 2, episode 12, Scream. Going back to Zeke, was he just that tenacious and that driven that he was able to prosper even under those conditions, and climb the ladder and become the war chief of that place, of that community or society, right? And he's the war chief of this warrior crew, right? But then the question becomes, did the fact that his mom or his mother could potentially be a royal also play a part in that, right? That's a possibility. That's certainly a possibility. And then if he is of royal blood, then that brings up the possibility of him being able to take on the founding titan, perhaps, right? But again, there's that catch of anyone of royal blood being controlled by the pacifist stance of the first king. And more on this first king later. You know, this whole concept of being in a separate place and starting something new is certainly starting to make much more sense right after you see the treatment of these people. But yeah, going back to Zeke, even if he is controlled by the pacifist stance, it doesn't matter because Zeke is firmly on that side, right? So they're not trying to get rid of the Titans that are outside of the walls, right? So he could make use of it. He could make use of all the other abilities, right? Other than that part, of course. So that could be a fascinating possibility. But again, for him to take on the founding Titan, he would have to consume Eren in one of those rituals, right? And again, in the last episode, it was clear that he has a sympathetic disposition towards Eren, right? He didn't have that same type of hate. Now he knows. It was clear that he knows this is Grisha's other son, right? Another son he had in here. But he also and now here's the interesting thing about the brainwashing. On one end you have Zeke telling Eren that your father, or our father, I guess, brainwashed you, right? Just like you brainwashed me, and that we're both victims of our father or Grisha. But then the interesting thing here is that these people, clearly they're the one who are doing the brainwashing and the propaganda against these set of people, right? This race that they are oppressing and establishing as evil and filthy spawn of the devil. But Zeke is on that side of the conflict, and he's telling Eren that he's been brainwashed by Grisha, yet the brainwashing is clearly being done on that side. Again, there's no two sides of the story in this case. It's a really distinct parallel. You can't allow something that nefarious to have their side. I'm sure they have their side of the story, and I'll get to see it at some point. But at this point in time, I can't excuse that kind of treatment of humans, of people. It's a really dark and distinct parallel to real history, a dark time in human history. So you have to say there's propaganda and brainwashing going on here, right? To establish these people as evil and filthy. But you have Zeke, who is related to Grisha and is possibly his son, believing that side of the story. And he thinks that Grisha is brainwashing his new son, right? So like I was talking about in the last episode, it appears that Zeke might have felt that any background story or backstory he might have told Eren about his past is just, it's not true. It's brainwashing Eren. And speaking of that, it's starting to get into that now, right? Grisha's backstory. A first-hand account of his ordeal in that place, in that society. So opposite ends of the scale here, man. You've got Zeke here telling Eren that he's been brainwashed, or is going to be brainwashed once he finds out about Grisha's past. Yet it appears that Zeke is the one who's buying into the propaganda, and he might have been brainwashed, right, to believe this cursed history that he mentioned. Now, I think there is a distinction to make here. I don't think he specifically said a filthy race or an evil race or spawn of the devil. He didn't say anything like that, right? Specifically, it was Reiner and Bertolt who said a combination of those things. I haven't heard Zeke say that yet. And yeah, man, it's just insane. It's just this little snippet of Grisha's backstory is just absolutely just flipped it on its head. Everything about the story. Now, jumping to Reiner, Bertolt, and Annie, since season 1, my stance on them has been I need to see their backstories, right? And even back then in season 1, I established, they're child soldiers, and in a lot of cases, or in most cases, child soldiers are brainwashed, right? And there's propaganda being fed to them. After seeing this episode, there's a strong possibility that yeah, it's kind of spot on. These child soldiers are fed this propaganda before they were sent off to, execute this mission of, retrieving the coordinate. Now, see, the interesting thing here is a few episodes ago on Descent, right? There's a flashback of Reiner, Annie, Bertolt, and Marco. Reiner really starts breaking out the whole, notion of them being an evil race, a filthy race. And in that same episode, Armin reminded Bertolt that he called them the devil, or spawn of the devil, right? These are the kind of things they were fed before, being sent off as child soldiers, or maybe even in their training to becoming child soldiers. But these people, these characters like Reiner, Bertolt, Annie, they were born long after this was already established, right? That there's this separate, filthy race, evil race that's among them. But again, another interesting thing here is the concept of them being similar enough that Reiner asked or challenged Annie to prove herself that she's not the same as this filthy race, right? He challenged her to prove it. So in that sense, I think I can even make a new theory out of this. It's possible that Annie might actually be from this selection of humans, this race, I suppose. But she kind of enlisted and became part of this crew, right? This warrior crew. And now you have someone like Reiner who is challenging her to prove herself, that her and her father are, not the same as this filthy race. So I'm getting the feeling that she might be the same race, but she's there's a I suppose there's I suppose there's a selection of them that are trying to prove themselves to this other race. So yeah, it is possible that Annie could be from that race, right? And she's trying to prove herself as different, right, or better than this race, and then extension to her father as well. Reiner, on the other hand, and maybe even Bertolt, though Bertolt's kind of in the middle. Reiner certainly seems like he's part of that race. He was he had so much hatred for them. But then again, Reiner had that split personality disorder thing that happened to him, right? The things he was doing, they were so, he felt so guilty about them. He felt so bad about them that he developed this other personality, so it affected him that much. So on one end, he has such hatred for these people, this race, but then on the other end, he felt so bad and so guilty about it that he ended up, developing this second personality that he doesn't really choose to go into, right? His mind just kind of goes there to deal with it, right? And it happened in that situation right then and there as Marco is being eaten by that Titan. So it's tough to say. But, and Bertolt, he believes this stuff, but he also has sympathy towards these people, right? He said, "You're my dear comrades, but you still have to die," right? So it appears these child soldiers had a tendency towards some kind of malign authority that is, feeding them propaganda and brainwashing them before sending them in. So I think I was on the money, right? On that front, I was bringing up this concept back in season 1. And as harsh and terrible as that situation is, or has been for these people, and it certainly is, it's a terrible situation. It's a dark parallel to a unforgivable time, a terrible time in our actual history. The story can only be emotionally compelling and perhaps intellectually fascinating as the forces of antagonism make it, right? So, as terrible as it is, I am intrigued by how it got to this point, and what exactly is it that makes these people a filthy race, according to them, of course, or an evil race, spawn of the devil. Now let's look at the place itself, this hometown, this place outside the walls, right? that's clearly, prospering just normally and prospering quite nicely, actually. I guess you could place it around 1930s or maybe 40s, early 1940s, if you're gonna do that parallel to this dark history from our own timeline. And it is Grisha's childhood, right? So you can see that in the clothing and some of the infrastructure, and of course the Zeppelin. Though again, I'm not a history buff, film buff, but I think perhaps the Zeppelin might have been around before then. But I'm not going to try to go any further than that. Again, I don't claim to be a history buff, but I know enough to position this or place this as perhaps 1930s or early 1940s, right? If they are drawing parallels to actual history and this part of history, terrible part of history. And then of course there's other things much more recent, things like coffee and baseball and canned herring, infrastructure in place for all this stuff. So the exciting, I know there's a lot of dark stuff here, but there's an exciting portion to this. The exciting portion to this is from Grisha's childhood. So that's what, 45 years ago, perhaps, right? Because Grisha, I'm not sure if they actually ever said his age. I think I would have remembered that. If I am misremembering, do leave a comment to let me know. But, I guess I could place him at something like late 40s, right? So yeah, there's a bit of a time skip there as well, right? In that time, there's been things like baseball and other infrastructure in place, industrial. It had that industrial era feeling to it, right? That's actually another exciting prospect, seeing how that place is 44 years later, perhaps. It's probably, at this point in time, it's probably like closer to our own reality, perhaps. And then you have the people inside the walls that are just disconnected from everything and stuck in a moment in time. And that in itself is quite fascinating as well, because, there are some things that are so foreign to them, things like coffee and photographs. That's something new to them. Yet they also have some things like the ODM gear, right, and some other things that do have a bit of a modern take on it. So it's again, it all comes down to them being frozen in a moment in time, and developing this kind of machinery or this kind of gear to combat these titans. That threat that was the titans for 100 years, right? Or it still is, I suppose. Now you can see in that flashback they have things together, and then if you skip to this current timeline and some of the things that have happened since season 2 to this point, these warriors, some of their actions or some of the things that have been brought up through their stories is also pointing at them being quite capable and advanced at this point. So they have things under control, so much so that they, even a long time ago, they had control of these titans, and they had just serum. They had so much serum, or they had the capacity to make so much serum that they could just use it as punishment, right? They initially showed that concept back in season 2, episode 10, right? The Children, I believe it was called, one of the best episodes of the series, Ymir's backstory. So that was another, look at them from the past. But see, it's kind of difficult to place these two timelines, because Ymir said she was out there for 60 years after being injected. So does that mean she was even younger, or she was even around before Grisha, perhaps? Right? 60 years. She was out there for 60 years. If that was after Grisha's time, Grisha has to be at least 60 years, and I don't think he was that old, right? So Ymir must have been before Grisha's time, right? And say if she is before Grisha's time, and the 60 years prospect certainly places her before Grisha's time. Even at that point in time, they had control of these, titans and the serums. They knew enough to, or they had enough control and know-how to use it as just punishment, to send them on this life of hell, right? This prison of flesh. So that's just kind of insane how far back this goes. Their control of these titans and the serum itself. And again, at this point in time, it's established that they have things under control. So I doubt they have titans running around outside their own walls, right? So now the question becomes, how did Grisha even become a titan then? Again, now the question also becomes, how far is this place from the walls, Wall Maria? And is it close enough that, these titans can somehow, roam around and then get to Wall Maria? But, again, it seems like such a sophisticated society, and they certainly do have things under control. I can't see them taking that risk of just, injecting these people, this filthy race, as they put it, outside their own walls, right? If you do that, they're just going to lurk around your own area. So there's even a possibility that they are taking them closer to the walls, right? The walls of Maria and, so forth, and then injecting them close to that. And, in that sense, they can get quite close, right? Because the people inside are not coming outside. Or even if they try to go outside, they can't really get that far because of the constant Titan threat, right? And in that sense, it also makes sense, right? They have so much of this serum that they use it as punishment. And, they send these Titans towards those walls, right? To keep them there, I suppose. And keep them surrounded, I guess. Yeah, a lot of things are falling into place now. A lot of things are starting to make sense. Now, the next point takes me to the first king, right? And this talk of paradise back in episode 10. Yuri was talking about, not being able to build paradise in such tiny walls. So, I brought up the concept of it feeling like, leaving this place and starting something new. Now, after seeing the things depicted in this episode, that becomes a stronger prospect, right? The treatment of these people is just horrendous, right? It's inhumane. So you can see how this first king might have wanted to start his own thing, right? Start from the ground up, separate from all of this. But then the question becomes, the timeline starts coming in again. At what point did this first king go and start his own thing, right? From the looks of it. It was 100 years. So it must have been before Grisha's time. Of course, it must have been. Before Ymir's time even. Okay, so... So yeah, that's been going on for a long time. Yeah, Yuri's talk of not being able to build paradise within such tiny walls. And then, even going back further to episode 7, the concept of, these omnipotent beings being the rulers of this domain, the walls, right, that they've created. That was brought up. And, even if they wanted to escape that, oppression and the treatment, it's not like they got here and everything was just, beautiful and perfect for the residents on this side, right? In the walls either, right? There's still segregation. There's still separation going on, it still became a pretty nasty place, even inside the walls. So human nature, right? That's human nature, I suppose. The rich closer to the middle, enjoying the luxuries, and then you have some of the less fortunate on the outskirts. But it's insane how much the story has just flipped upside down after, the photo, the family portrait, and then that snippet of Grisha's childhood. And the conditions, the living conditions of his people, I suppose. It'll be interesting to find out, just why they're so hated, right? And looked down upon. But yeah, it's insane how much was packed into this. Just a snippet of backstory to kick it off. It'll be interesting to see if they go right into it in the next episode, right, the continuation of this, or if they go to the scouts, being back home and explaining this to the higher ranking officials, Zachary and Historia, Queen Historia, right? And then, piece by piece, they might show us like that. Now, I mean, they're certainly going to show us that backstory. They kicked it off, Grisha narrating it, and he was choosing this moment to kick it off, So Grisha Yeager's backstory it promises to be a fascinating one, that's for sure. A game-changing one, right? It flipped it upside down. Everything's just different now. Again, before the basement, after the basement. And, in that sense, characters are defined by the microcosms in which they live, right? And they're defined by their surroundings, right? Their choices and limitations are driven by those surroundings. So yeah, it'll be fascinating to see how Grisha progresses and how he got to that point of becoming, or, climbing the ladder, becoming a doctor, and then at some point showing up outside the wall, Wall Maria, just by himself, and he was a titan at that point. So a lot of stuff still needs to happen, right? They need to show a lot of stuff, and in that sense, storytelling is all about having respect for your audience, right? I think incredible storytellers, be it in any medium, right? Films, shows, anime, books, gaming even. And I think a lot of these incredible storytellers are moved by the idea, or moved by the desire to touch the audience, right? To make them feel just something incredible, right? Through their storytelling. And, Isayama-san certainly does that, right? He has so much respect for the audience, and it just oozes from this incredible material, right? And, that takes me back to that point I made in the first half of season 3. He's a master at the drip feed method, right? He's just so good at the setup and the payoff, right? He just now, even this one, I'll get into it, if the basement lived up to all the hype or not. But he's a master at the drip feed method, dropping crucial information at just the right moment, at critical moments to create critical turning points. So I say yes, that was a satisfying payoff. I certainly think so. It was so substantial. It is just so substantial. And I think I've just scratched the surface, right? But it was, again, enough to make it such a big thing that, it really is before the basement and after the basement. He's just exceptional in the setup and the payoff. So that was certainly satisfying. No disappointment here. The basement gave me more than enough already. So I'm excited to see how it all plays out, going more into Grisha's backstory. But, that also reminds me of something Dan Brown once said, that suspense is, the concept of suspense is kind of like making a promise to the audience, that something they don't, right? But I promise you, if you stick around, I'll tell you, right? So that's the hook he was talking about. And Isayama-san certainly knows how to do that, right? He certainly made the promise all the way back in episode 1. He's like, I know something you don't, this basement, but if you stick around, I'll tell you at some point. And here it is, man. And it was satisfying, thoroughly satisfying. no disappointment on my end. And, most of the focus of this post-episode discussion so far has been on the actual revelations that came out of this journal in the basement. But, the moments leading up to it, I thought that was so effective, and the absence of dialogue, again, it made it so effective. A somber walk down memory lane, right? Reminiscing about the good times, the fond memories, and perhaps even the nightmarish memories. So I quite like that scene. You really felt the journey of them, finally getting back to this moment. I think it really did establish the enormity of the situation, and rightfully so. This is a big moment for them. It's an emotional moment for them. There's a lot of scars attached to this. Them returning back home, back to Shiganshina, their hometown area, the neighborhood around their home. It's a big moment, man. And you felt it. You really did feel it. I certainly felt it. And, I love that the focus wasn't just on Eren. There was just as much focus on Mikasa in this case. And in that sense, it totally makes sense, right? Because she grew up in that household. And, I love that sweet moment, that sweet little flashback of her giving Grisha, Dr. Jaeger, that tray, right? And as he's going down to the basement for the all-nighter. So she has her own fond memories of this man. She has so much respect for this man. And that's been clear throughout the series, right? Anytime I've seen Mikasa speak of Dr. Jaeger, or anytime I've seen her in some of the earlier episodes alongside Dr. Jaeger, or, in flashbacks, she has so much respect for this man, right? So essentially, he was a father figure for her as well, right? He took her in, and the Jaegers are family. So I'm so happy that the focus is on Mikasa as well. And right at the end there, as Eren is taking a moment before he opens that journal, and again, I thought that was a great addition, to have a moment of pause right before he opens it. Because it's not just opening any other journal. This is a life-altering moment. This is something that is meant to, change humanity's outlook on the outside world, right? And this is something that his father was meant to show him a long time ago, right? The truth of it all. So it's a big moment. And, I love that in that moment, Mikasa kind of puts her hand over his hand. Once again, she's there to support him. I'm here for you. Let's do this together. To put him at ease, a bit at ease, again, in that moment. Because you can see he's feeling the pressure or that enormity of the situation again, right? How much this just really means. And in that sense, I totally forgot to even mention it. Eren's thoughts on this are going to be quite fascinating, right? He's going to find out that his father had a whole different life before his mother, Carla, and him, and Mikasa. That's one of the most exciting prospects of this. The journals, the knowledge, the information, right? A plethora of it, hopefully. So it'll be fascinating to see his reaction to all of this. Moving to the first half of the episode, again, it allowed for a moment of reflection, a breather for these characters, right? And again, for us, the audience, because it's been one insane ride. These past 3 episodes, the 3 episodes before this. I mean, this one is, the basement. It's a mindfuck in its own, but the first half of that really allowed things to slow down a bit, right? And I've got to say, I really liked Hanji and Levi's approach here, right? Hanji in particular, she was, no sugarcoating. She was right to the point, direct, as the new, commander, right? The successor to Commander Smith. She didn't sugarcoat anything to Armin. She told him, of course, Commander Smith should have been the choice, but you're here. So, that's all there needs to be said about that. And, Levi was put in charge to make that choice, right? But again, Levi did specify that he made the choice to let the commander rest, that this is going to be his resting place, right? Letting his friend finally rest, and let him escape from this hell. But then he also made it quite clear that, of course, the commander would have been the best choice, the only choice really, in that scenario. But then he also told Armin, you can't replace him. There's no chance you can ever replace him. And like I said, you can't expect Armin to replace the commander. No one can replace the commander. He's one of a kind. He's a spearhead, and he was a spearhead. He was this so unique, right, in his abilities, a leader of men, right? And it's just unfair. It would be just unfair to even expect Armin to ever, replace him or try to put himself in those shoes. But, Levi reminded him that you have something else. You have something unique of your own that only you have, right? So don't regret it, right? No regrets. It's done now. Let's move on, right? And, that being said, of course, the burden and the guilt is going to be there for some time. It might even be there right till the end of his character arc, or or till the conclusion of the series, right? Until he feels like he's earned this, right? But again, to be fair, Armin, he didn't make the choice. In fact, he was actually quite open and, intelligent enough to know that, of course, there was only one choice. He couldn't even fathom the possibility that there was a debate, right? That, they would debate who's the better choice. He's wise enough to know that, of course, there's only one choice in that matter. The logical choice is Commander Smith. But then, of course, he also learned something crucial, that his dear friends fought for him, right? And they felt that his life means that much to them. And they think that much of him that they defied higher ranking officials. So, he learned something new on that end as well, on that front as well. Because I don't know if he felt that before, if he thought that they would do something like that for him in that scenario. I don't know. There have been moments where he thinks that he is expendable in the past. Throughout the series, there have been moments. It's been quite clear to him that he is expendable. So he learned something incredible from this, how it all played out. Though, of course, they are going to get punished for being out of line, and they were out of line. And Hanji, made a great point of that. Just because you're able to or ready to accept the punishment, does that mean you're going to do anything you want, right? So that's something to keep in mind as the story progresses. Keeping their emotions in check. Because I'm sure they're going to get into more high tension situations, high drama situations. So yeah, let's see how it all plays out. And, I also got to see some of that new Titan Shifter memory loss on display. The last thing Armin remembered was the nuke, the colossal nuke going off. And then, even before that, he had that... he felt, he had this, I guess he was having these thoughts of Bertolt, but it was also Sasha's actions beside him kind of leaking in as well, right? But he was certainly thinking, that was certainly in his mind, right? He was certainly thinking of Bertolt and his sorrow in that moment, right? So again, I mentioned that perhaps Bertolt's kind of like part of him now, and, from time to time, maybe Bertolt's thoughts might leak in. So I think that's about it for this fascinating episode. And also, it should be noted that the commander, they made a point of showing us that the commander was right. His father was right. The humanity outside the walls still exists. They're not the only ones. So great little touch to have those flashbacks leak in, and Niall, being disappointed in himself for not believing him all that time ago and not being open-minded enough, right, to that possibility. And it's kind of strange that not too many other people kind of connected those dots. That these textbooks are not objective. There's some quite definitive stuff in there. A lot of definitive statements in there, and that nothing is being left open to interpretation, right? And he saw that early on, and he didn't like that one bit. Now his father, again, another intelligent individual, clearly he picked up on that, but of course he was wise enough to know that he can't openly talk about that. And then in that sense there's a bit of a parallel here, through Grisha's flashback as well. The naive, I believe he said my naive childhood, right? Moments of my naive childhood, kind of similar to the inquisitive mind of a young Commander Smith, not knowing that the things he could cause by asking that question, by posing that question, right? The inquisitive mind of a prodigy, like I said in the last episode. But yeah, that's about it. Some fascinating talking points came out of that. Things got really crazy, Some of these theories maybe got a bit jumbled up now. I don't know, man. Or maybe they even got stronger. I'll have to see. I'll have to see how it all plays out. So if you enjoyed that, consider dropping a like, consider leaving some comments, giving me your thoughts, consider subscribing to the channel. There's a schedule in place. There's going to be a specific day for Shingeki, so check the schedule for that. If you're interested in full length for this episode, or even early access to the next episode right now, consider checking out the Patreon page, and the links to that are in the pinned comment alongside links to my social media. Check out the Patreon page, and doing so you'll be supporting the channel. And that was a fascinating episode, man. Fascinating episode. And these next few episodes promise to be just quite fascinating, right? The continuation of this backstory, hopefully. So I'm quite excited for that. Quite excited. So thanks for joining me for this one. I hope to see you soon. Take it easy.